Welcome back. Fall semester for college is over and I'm back home. I'm ready to teach y'all something. So let's get into it. So first of all, let's take a look at my portfolio. So as you can see in the left-hand corner, you'll see that my account balance is $4,157, but it keeps fluctuating. The chart right now is on a 5-day chart. Let's kind of go to my all-time. As you can see on the all-time chart, you can tell I've made quite a bit of money, but this just takes into account how much money I've actually put in and how much is that in gains. To look at my gains, we can look at the open P&L, which is this number right here. And that's kind of how much money I'm up so far. And it's almost $1,300. We can also look at how much I'm down so far in just a day. This is all unrealized, so it's not like I'm actually down as much because it can always fluctuate, go up and down. I'm currently down $49, but I'm not thinking about it. The reason why I say all this is because I want to look into something. But before we get started, I'm not a financial advisor. You do what you want with your finances, but I'm going to show you why I invest in Google. And I'm going to show you why it's a great company. So if we look down here in the bottom right-hand corner, we can look at my Google position, which is ticker symbol GOOG. And I currently have 8 shares, and it will only go up till, but it's currently at a market value of $2,605. And my open P&L is almost $1,000. That always fluctuates. As Google price goes up, that P&L will go up. As it goes down, it'll go down too. But that's enough for the background. Let's jump into the facts. In this video, I'll be talking about the 2 recent quarters that Google had. We're going to be talking about Q2 and Q3 of 2025. Q4 hasn't come out yet. That'll come out sometime in January. So zooming in to make it a little bit more readable, we can read that alphabet, which is Google. Revenue in Q2 2025 increased 14%. That's beautiful right there, 14%. Listen to this. Year over year to $96.4 billion, reflecting robust momentum across the business. Google Search, YouTube Ads, Google subscriptions, platforms, and devices in Google Cloud each delivered double-digit growth in Q2. This is in 2025. Google Services revenue increased 12% to $82.5 billion, reflecting strong performance across Google Search and others. Google subscriptions, platforms and devices, and YouTube ads. I use YouTube ads too. And also, this is something important too, that Google Cloud's revenue increased 32% to $13.6 billion. I kind of scroll down a little bit. We can read that the net income increased 19% and the earnings per share increased 22% to $2.31. Now, looking at what the CEO said during the earnings report, he said we had a standout quarter with robust growth across the company, leading at the frontier of AI and shipping at an incredible pace. Search delivered double-digit revenue growth. AI overviews and AI mode are performing well. Its annual run rate revenue is more than $50 billion. Lastly, he said we are increasing our investment in capital expenditures in 2025 to approximately $85 billion and are excited about the opportunity ahead. So basically, they're raising capex. So looking into the actual numbers, we can read that in June 30th, when they last reported their Q2 earnings, and we can read that Google was producing $84,000 in revenue, but times that's a million, so $84 million. Now looking at Q2 of this year, we can see that the revenue increased to $96,000. But remember, that's also in millions. So we can actually see that the revenue actually increased 14%. The only difference is the constant change in currency year over year, which in June 30th of last year was higher than this year. We can also see that operating income is also increasing. Last year Q2 it was $27,000, but this year it's $31,000. And the net income they produced was $23,000 of last year. So of Q2 of 2024, the net income was $23,000, while this year is $28,000. So they're growing in revenue, growing in net income. So scrolling down a little bit more, the earnings report will give a breakdown of different segments and different sectors of the company. So we can see that Google Search is growing. As in Q2 of last year, it was $48,000. Remember, this also in millions. Whereas in Q2 of 2025, it's $54,000. So Google Search is growing. They're also growing in YouTube ads, which makes sense. Q2 of last year was $8,000, whereas Q2 of this year is $9,000. So we can also look into the advertising sector. So Q2 of 2024, it was $64,000 combined, and this year is $71,000. You can also see that Google Cloud is growing. That makes sense. Q2 was $10,000. This year is $13,000 of Q2. We can also read that Google is growing their employees. Q2 of last year was $179,000, whereas this year is $187,000. So that's just an indicator that Google is growing as a company. Also, I want to mention, you can also find this as well. So don't think I'm just out here having this exclusive information. Make sure you do your research into these companies. First of all, let's look at the asset sheet. I'll skip over a lot of this stuff, but let's go into the total assets. So as we can see from the top, December 31st of 2024, their total assets was $450,000. But remind you, this is in millions, so $450 million. Whereas this year of Q2, it was $502 million. Now we can look at the liabilities. The long-term liabilities from Q2 of last year was $125,000, whereas of this year is $139,000. So they're growing in liabilities, but also their assets are growing. And the assets are far outpacing the actual liabilities, which is great. So looking at some more stuff, we can look at the net income. But first of all, let's look at the revenues. So as you can see from the revenues is constantly increasing. This is only from Q2 as well. We can also look at the net income of 2024, where it was $23,000, whereas in June 30th for 2025, it was $28,000. So they're growing in also net income. Now, if we look at the last 2 sections right here, which is year to date 2024, it was $47,000, whereas in June 2025, it was $62,000. This is probably one of the most important pieces is Google is actually stopping to dilute the shares. So why this is so important is when you dilute shares and you release more shares to the public, the value of someone who already holds the stock before they dilute the shares will go down. So lastly, what I want to hit on this right here of Q2 is Google Services includes products and services such as ads, Android, Chrome, devices, Google Maps, Google Play, Search, and YouTube. Google Services generates revenues primarily from advertising. Fees received for consumer subscription-based products such as YouTube TV, YouTube Music, and Premium, and NFL Sunday Ticket, as well as Google One, the sale of apps and in-app purchases and devices. Let's go to the next slide. Lastly, we can look at the free cash flow. So what free cash flow is defined right here. We define free cash flow as net cash provided by operating activities less capital expenditures. So first we can look at Q3 of 2024, which was $17,000. Then it had a drastic change to Q2 of 2025, which now is sitting at $5,000. Also, this is in millions. So looking at this, someone may be worried, but also they're spending a lot of capex on AI and growing the company. All right, so I actually had to move it back inside because it got a little too cold outside. But let's go ahead and look at quarter 3 earnings from Google. Also, I want to remind you that this is 2025. So we finished with Q2. Google definitely performed on Q2, especially compared to 2024. We can start from the first bullet point where it says Alphabet revenues in Q3 2025 increased 16% year over year to $102.3 billion. Let's go back to Q2. So as we scroll back up, we can see Google increased revenues of 14% to $96.4 billion. Look at Q3 though, $100.2 billion in Q3. We can also read that Google Services revenues increased 14% to $87.1 billion, reflecting robust performance across Google Search, Google subscriptions, platforms, and devices, and YouTube ads. We can also read that Google Cloud revenues increased 34% to $15.2 billion. The net income increased 33% and EPS increased 35% to $2.87 per share. In the last little bullet point, we now expect 2025 capital expenditures to be in a range of $91 billion to $93 billion. Little side note from the CEO, we delivered our first ever $100 billion quarter. Man, you gotta love when the CEO says that. So as we scroll back down, we can look at the Gemini app has over 650 million monthly active users. And also they have over 300 million paid subscriptions led by Google One and YouTube Premium. So kind of going back over this Gemini one, so this is during the time that DeepSeek was taking over. Everyone was in craze for ChatGPT and everyone was talking about how Google search is going to get destroyed by ChatGPT. Even I had a little bit of doubts, but after reading this earnings statement right here, this definitely solidified my investment, and also Joseph Carson too. So getting down to the actual numbers, we can read that the revenue increased from Q3 of 2024 to Q3 of 2025. It started at a revenue of $88,000. This is also in millions, and it reached to $102,000. We can also read that the revenue from last year of Q3 to this year of Q3 increased from 15 to 16%. The operating income increased as well from $28,000 to $31,000. Net income increased as well from $26,000 to $34,000. So kind of get into more of the numbers. We can read that Google search from last year of Q3 grew in numbers from $49,000 last year to this year to $56,000. Google ads also grew, as you know. The Google network actually didn't grow as much, from 7,500 to 3,500. But if we look at Google advertising, grew from 65,000 to 74,000. A little bit more, Google subscriptions, platform, and devices grew as well. Google services grew as well from 76,000 to 87,000. Google Cloud grew, of course, and the number of employees also grew as well. We also looked at Q2, where the number was around 187. But now we look at Q3 of 2025 is 190,000 employees. So in terms of assets of last year of Q3, we can read that it was 450,000, whereas this year is 536,000. Mind you, this is unaudited, but we can look at the liabilities because the assets versus liabilities, you want your assets to be higher than your liabilities. Total liabilities from Google from last year of Q3 was 125,000, whereas this year is 149,000. Kind of looking at more of the numbers, we can read that the revenue is growing. Q3 of last year, 88,000 to this year, 102,000. Year to date, 253,000 to 289,000. And we can also look at from Q2 to Q3 that the share dilution is actually going down. Kind of looking at some more numbers, we can look at the share buyback, whereas year to date is 46,671, whereas in this quarter it was reported 40,210. So another important metric would be the free cash flow. That would be right here. So from Q4 of 2024, it's $24,837. Whereas in Q3 is $24,461. And we can look at the trailing 12 months, which now it says $73,552. So once again, I want to show you that because I definitely love investing. So this is actually one of my first times actually going into a company's financials and kind of going through the quarters and looking at the different metrics that they release and basing my judgment off of that. See if that company is something I would actually want to invest in. Because as you can see, I have $2,596 into this company. So I'm not playing around, and it's only going to keep going up. So the last thing I wanted to show y'all is when I first bought into the company. This is around where I invested in, $174 to $175. Then you can see the big drop right here to $166 per share. But then as you can tell, I mean, Google has been on a rocket. It's just been going up and up and up. So now it hit a top $323 per share. So kind of wrapping everything up, I definitely want to make more videos like this. And if you want to see more stuff like this, man, comment below and let me know. And if there's anything that you want to know or anything that I messed up on, please let me know in the comments. Because like I said before, I'm new to this, but I want to learn and I want to keep learning and I want to be able to learn and teach y'all what I learned. But yeah, man, that's about it. Hope you have a great rest of your day, great rest of your night, whatever you're doing right now. Catch you on the next one. Cue the outro.
But it's time to be alive, yeah. But it's time to be alive, yeah. What it's time to be alive, yeah. Put a other